and welcome to Advancing Pawn. In this video, we'll cover an opening, Queen's Gambit declined, Semi-Tarrasch exchange variation. ECO code for the opening is D41. I analyzed this opening using a Grandmaster game played between Magnus Carlsen and Jeffrey Zion. So I'll follow the move order that I got from that game, but you could get to similar positions by following few different move orders as well. Okay, let's get on with the game. D4, which is a queen pawn opening, and black's response is NF6. It is the Indian game. White follows it up with C4. It's a typical follow-up move in many queen pawn openings, and black responds with E6. At this stage, it's called East Indian defense. White's next move is NF3. This is East Indian, Anti-Nimzo Indian variation. If white had played NC3 instead of NF3, black had the option of moving BB4, thereby pinning the knight on C3 against the king. I guess because NF3 gets black away from this continuation, it's called Anti-Nimzo Indian variation. And black responds with D5. At this stage, this opening becomes Queen's Gambit declined. Instead of this move order, black could have played D5 in the very first move and then followed it up with NF6 and E6 as well. White basically offers the C4 pawn for free. It's unprotected. The idea is that if black captures this pawn and tries to hang on to the extra pawn advantage, it usually results in poor structural development for black, thereby leaving white with better development and attack. In this case, black simply ignores the free offer and gets on with other development, which is why it is Queen's Gambit declined. The other choices black had instead of D5 were B6, for example. This would have taken the game into Queen's Indian defense, or BB4 check was another choice. This is called Bogo Indian defense. C5 was another choice, stay in Anti-Nimzo Indian variation. And NC6 is another option, again to continue in Anti-Nimzo Indian variation. Okay, let's stay with what black actually moved, which is D5. White's fourth move is NC3. This is three knights variation in Queen's Gambit declined. White had many other options at this stage as well to play instead of NC3. G3 is a possibility. E3 is another. And QC2 can also be played. All of these within Queen's Gambit declined opening. BG5 is called the traditional variation in Queen's Gambit declined. There are some games in the archive that I analyzed where C cross D5 is played as well, but it doesn't look like a strong alternative for white, as there are fewer white wins in proportion compared to the other choices. So unless we analyze this further and see how to continue strongly for white, I recommend not to play this option for now. Let's go back to what was actually played in the game, NC3, three knights variation. And black's next move is the most important for this video because c5 makes this opening semi-Tarrasch defense, which is what we are intending to cover in this video. Black had other choices like c6, which would have been Semi-Slav Defense, or b7, which is a continuation in three knights variation. b4 is another choice. In this continuation, it is called Ragozin Defense. NBD7 is called Barmen Variation. And D cross c4 could also have been played. This is the Vienna Variation. Let's stick to what was played, which was c5. And now we are in Semi-Tarrasch defense. White takes c cross d5. What are the other options? White could have played e3, which is Tarrasch defense. White could also have played bg5, which is Pillsbury variation in Semi-Tarrasch. bf4 is another choice. I see two more options in the archives that I analyzed, but both of them have much fewer white wins in proportion, so they don't look like strong options, and I recommend not to play those. But just for theory, let me show them. D cross c5 is one of those, and g3. But again, in this position, I do not recommend these two options until we analyze further. Let's stay on c cross d5, which was played. This is main line in Semi-Tarrasch. And black takes knight cross d5. Knight cross d5 looks like the obvious move. If not, cross d5 could have been played. But the whole idea is that if white captures d cross c5, that leaves black with an isolated pawn along b file. And it could turn out to be a weak target for white down the line. So knight cross d5 avoids leaving an isolated pawn here. Another option that looks sharp and can be played is c cross d4. Knight d5 was actually played, and now white moves e4. So this is the move that takes us into exchange variation in Semi-Tarrasch defense. Instead of e4, white could have played e3, which is Pillsbury variation, or g3, which is another choice in Semi-Tarrasch main line. But e4 is played. And pretty much the only good choice for black seems to be knight takes c3. The other options are c cross d4. This continuation has much fewer black wins, so the ratio implies this is not very strong for black. And if not for c cross d4, knight could simply go back to f6, but this looks very passive as well and leaves white with better development. So obviously there is a much higher proportion of white wins in this continuation as well. So once e4 is played, I think exchange is the obvious continuation. So knight takes on c3, and white has to take back on c3 to regain the lost material. So b cross c3. Black's next move is C cross D4. Are there any other choices? I see some games in which black has played B7. In this continuation, there are more white wins than the average, so I think this is not a very strong alternative. Other choice that I see in few games is ND7, which again appears to leave white with an advantage. There's an even higher proportion of white wins that I can see in the archive. So C cross D4 appears to be the best choice that black has. And white takes back on C cross D4. In some games, white has taken the pawn back on D4, but it looks relatively more strong for black in this continuation. Instead of immediately taking the pawn back, white can play bishop b5 check, but again this looks relatively better for black as well. So the best choice for white looks like C cross d4 to keep it simple and get the pawn back. Black plays bb4 check. Instead, black can try nc6 as well. These are two possibilities to continue in Semi-Tarrasch exchange variation. Let's stay with bb4 check that was played in the game. And white responds with bishop d2 to block the check. Can we block with nd2 instead? No, it would have been a blunder because queen can simply take on d4. That means black is already ahead by a pawn, and also the rook on a1 is left hanging, pawn on e4 is left hanging, knight is pinned, so it is not really protecting the pawn on e4, and it might be tough for white even to get bishop out of the way and find time to castle. So this looks clearly advantageous for black. So definitely not knight d2. White blocks with bishop d2. And bishop takes d2 check. For a moment it looks tempting to bring queen to a5 instead. So black can double down and increase the pressure along this diagonal on d2. But it is not effective because white has a simple response rb1. Now, there is not an easy way to support bishop on b4 further, so it kind of forces black to go ahead with an exchange or two and simplify the position. And apparently, white looks better developed, and there is also a space advantage for white to play with. If black tries to support the bishop with nc6, it's a blunder because white can simply take on b4, and if knight takes b4, queen b3 puts the knight on b4 in trouble. The knight can't move out of the way because queen on a5 is exposed to attack from bishop on d2. There is no other piece that can come forward and provide additional support to retain the knight on b4. Black can try the trick queen a3, and if white captures on a3, it can give a check on c2, thereby forking the king and queen and winning back the queen. But white doesn't have to fall for it. White can simply take on b4 and is ahead on material and development. So qa5 doesn't look like a great alternative. Simpler and stronger is bishop d2 check. and white recaptures with queen cross d2. Black castles. Black can try c6 as well instead of castling, but I like castling a lot more at this stage, as king gets to the safety of g8, and then black can continue forward to develop further. So that's all I have on Queen's Gambit declined Semi-Tarrasch exchange variation in this video. I'll try to follow this up with some master games analysis in the same line so we can consolidate our opening knowledge and add it to our repertoire. I hope you enjoyed watching the video and learning along with me, and see you in the next video in Advancing Pawn.